Well, today we're going to be taking a look at the guns of another classic Western. And this is one that I've probably gotten the most requests for, and I can understand why, because it's a favorite of mine as well, and many people really like it. So today we're going to look at the guns of Wanted, Dead or Alive. Well, before I talk about the guns, I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the show itself. So for those of you who only want to see the guns, and I know there are plenty of you who do, I'm just going to recommend that you use that little magic fast forward button on your computer or your phone and just go forward until you see a gun. And when you see a gun, stop it and start watching. And that way you don't have to send me comments about, oh my God, I can't believe it took you 2 minutes and 30 seconds before you started talking about the guns. Okay? So, a little bit of background first. Wanted, Dead or Alive aired on the CBS television network here in the United States from 1958 until 1961. The series starred Steve McQueen as bounty hunter Josh Randall, and this was a character that first appeared in Robert Culp's TV series Trackdown a year earlier. And if you're curious about Trackdown, I covered that in an earlier video, so you can look it up on the channel and watch that if you'd like. Now, McQueen played Josh Randall, who was a bounty hunter with a hard-bitten exterior but a heart of gold. And he was a huge fan favorite. Now, Randall didn't just track down, wanted criminals and put them in jail. He helped to find missing husbands, fathers, daughters, all sorts of people. In fact, in one episode, he even found Santa Claus. So he was quite the busy guy. So let's talk about the guns used in the series, or more properly, let's talk about the gun. In the 1950s and 1960s, almost every major character in a Western television show had a gimmick. Whether it was Lash LaRue's whip, Lucas McCain's rapid-firing lever-action rifle. But gimmicks abounded. It seemed like everybody had some sort of a gimmick. Whether it was a derringer hidden in their belt buckle or up their sleeve or whatever. And Steve McQueen's Josh Randall probably had the ultimate gimmick of them all as far as a weapon goes, a distinctive weapon. Because what he had was a sawed-off model 1892 Winchester rifle turned into a gun that they dubbed the Mare's Leg, which is basically trying to make an 1892 lever-action rifle pistol length. Now, why anybody would want to do that, to be honest with you, in practical terms, it pretty much escapes me and probably escapes everybody else. But as a gimmick, it was excellent because it made McQueen's character instantly recognizable and different from every other Western character on the screen at the time. So instead of carrying a Colt single-action revolver, McQueen's Josh Randall wore his Model 92 Winchester on a gun belt, essentially, with a holster facsimile, just like a handgun. Now, as I said, this gun was dubbed the Mare's Leg, and it was actually called that back in that in that Trackdown episode that Steve McQueen guest starred in. And that was laying the groundwork for this series to follow basically a year later. Now, the Mare's Leg was designed by Kenny Von Dutch Howard, who was a gunsmith in the Hollywood area, and it was not cheap. Each one cost the studio $1,100, and that's $1,158. And they needed 3 of them because you need to have them for continuity in case one gets damaged so you don't hold up production. So that was an expensive call for the studio, but I think they got their money's worth out of it. So what Von Dutch did is he took a full-size Model 1892 rifle and cut it down to a 9-inch barrel and, basically 9-inch magazine. Redesigned the forearm, moved the barrel bands, took off the rear sight, and cut off most of the buttstock. Steve McQueen himself was involved in the final design of the Mare's leg, and he had Von Dutch make something called the duck-billed hammer. And the purpose of this is actually for fanning, which is crazy when you think about it on a lever-action rifle. I mean, on a single-action pistol, I'll use this one as an example. If you hold the trigger back and you fan it, right, each time you do that, you're advancing the cylinder and firing another new round. So even though fanning is not the greatest thing in the world, it's difficult to shoot accurately, though some guys are excellent at it. And I doubt if it was actually done in the Old West. You can understand how it works and the reasonableness of it. Fanning a 92 rifle gives you one shot, right? Assuming that the rifle had a round in the chamber and it was on half cock, fan that one time, then you got to work the lever to get the next shell in. So, why they thought that was a good idea? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it looks impressive on TV, and they did it. So that was one feature of that rifle. Steve McQueen also had some input into the holster that the Mare's leg was carried in or on, I should say. And I'll talk a little bit more about the holster in a few minutes because it actually rates a little discussion in and of itself. Now, interestingly enough, the first Mare's leg that Von Dutch Howard made had a round barrel. But the other two had octagon barrels. And that actually posed some continuity difficulties during the series because they just didn't keep good enough track of them. So sometimes a scene would start with the round-barreled gun, and that same scene would finish with an octagon-barreled gun. Now, most people, particularly in the low resolution of 1950s and 60s TV, didn't pick up on that because they rarely had close-ups of the gun. But I often wondered why they didn't just look for 2 more round-barrel guns. I have no idea. But they didn't, and therefore they had some issues from it. Now, one of the pet peeves that almost every knowledgeable gun person expresses about that Mare's leg on Wanted Dead or Alive is that it's obviously a Model 92 Winchester, which means it was chambered in pistol caliber cartridges, and in fact, the actual Mare's leg used by Josh Randall was chambered in .44-40. And yet, on the gun belt that Steve McQueen wears, all of the shells are gigantic .45-70 shells, which in no way could have chambered in that gun. And of course, the studio did it because they look more impressive on the gun belt. But nobody who's aware of guns thought that was a good idea. I mean, everybody looking at it would know that you would never even get that shell in the chamber. Right? So Steve McQueen was essentially carrying a belt full of ammunition that he never could have used. But through the magic of Hollywood, that was okay. Now, one of the issues that the studio ran into is that the Mare's leg with a 9-inch barrel was considered a short rifle. Now, these days, modern-made Mare's legs are usually marketed as handguns. But you couldn't have a rifle with a barrel less than 18 inches unless you got a transfer stamp, just like a machine gun. So it came to the attention of the ATF that Josh Randall, the bounty hunter, was armed with an illegal weapon. Which, when you think of it, is just crazy, right? But what it really boils down to is the ATF wanted their pound of flesh. So they didn't prosecute the studio. As far as I know, they didn't even fine them. But they must have fined them because they collected $1,100 in taxes, which is more than the $600 transfer tax would have been for the 3 guns. So anyway, they got their pound of flesh out of that, and then the studio was able to use those dangerous short rifles. But I just find that pretty humorous. Of course, that was a law that was enacted to try to curtail the activities of 1930s gangsters. But, like I say, the federal government needed its pound of flesh, and it got it. Now, I want to talk about the gun belt that the mare's leg was on, because except for the unfortunate choice of putting 45-70 cartridges in the belt loops, the gun belt itself was actually pretty fascinating, and Steve McQueen apparently had some input in this, because the way it worked is it's not really a holster. It's a panel back on a drop loop. Nice stiff panel back. And what it had was a leather-covered hook. And that hook engaged the saddle ring on the Model 92. So essentially, the 92 was suspended from that belt holster on its saddle ring. Then to keep it from flopping around, there was a leather-covered spring clip that went around the barrel and held it in place. So the gun could either be lifted off of the hook and moved forward through the spring hook to the spring clip to fire it, or in a pinch, you could keep it on the hook and just rotate it forward. The barrel would pop up out of that spring clip, and you could shoot it right from the holster, essentially. Very, very neat design. I mean, crazy. Nobody would have done that, I don't think, in real life in the 19th century, but pretty ingenious for a TV design, I've got to say. I think every kid loved that, Oh, boy. Now, like I said, there were 3 mare's legs made for the show. One of them is now in the Autry Museum of the West in L.A., so it's on permanent display. The other 2 ended up in private hands. One of them, I believe, is in France right now. And another one had been in like a bar and restaurant for years. I'm not sure where that one ended up when it closed. Now, the series itself, Wanted Dead or Alive, was extremely popular. But it only ran for 3 seasons, which seems kind of crazy. And there are several of these 50s and 60s westerns that are in a similar boat that are considered iconic today and yet did not have long runs. Now, when Wanted Dead or Alive started, so you've got to ask the question, why did it get canceled, right? I mean, don't studio executives like making money? Because they always seem to want to do that. So why did they cancel a popular show? And what seems to have happened is, 2 things. But a real contributing factor has got to be Steve McQueen's personality. By all accounts, Steve McQueen was very difficult to work with. And that was from day one, when he didn't have a whole lot of credibility even, but he was a terror on the set. I mean, if the people working there weren't people that he liked and approved of, he wanted them fired. He was difficult. As it turns out, he was also expensive, because when the series started, he was an unknown, and he was paid $27,000 a year for the first season. And that sounds amazingly low now. I mean, you almost make that in a week almost these days. Inflation's become so bad. But he was paid $27,000 for the season. And in fact, each mare's leg that he had cost more than he made for an episode of the show. But by the time they went into season 3, he was making $100,000 per season. And he was just about the highest paid actor in series television at the time. That was an incredible TV salary for 1960. And the studio did not like paying it. Because as popular as the show was, they didn't like working with McQueen. So what they did is they moved the night of Wanted Dead or Alive to, it was either Friday or Saturday night, one of the dead nights of the week. And of course, viewership plummeted because that was date night in America, and people were not watching much TV. So they used the low ratings then, the dropped ratings, as an excuse to cancel the show. Which, since McQueen was really agitating to start his movie career, he was not complaining about that. And he's one of the stars who actually made a successful jump from TV to Hollywood movies. Maybe the most successful, though James Garner also did quite well in movies. And in TV. So he's not the only one, but McQueen was probably the biggest movie star to come out of television at the time. So, I don't think he minded having his series canceled at that point. Unfortunately, those of us who love the show, we minded quite a bit because we didn't get to see him as Josh Randall again. But we did get to see him in the Magnificent Seven, so I guess it probably all worked out for the best. So, that's my look at The Gun of Wanted Dead or Alive. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, as they say. My friend Santee would say on the Arizona Ghostwriters. And until next time, bye.